Nephrekh Dynasty Previews, the C'tan Shard, and Night Scythes.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, today we're going to have a look at the last Dynasty Code preview, the Nephrekh Dynasty. Before that though, if you would like to keep up to date with the wonders of Warhammer 40k, then please give me a sub and hit the bell button so you don't miss an upload. Okay, so we've spent all week looking at the Necron Dynasty codes for the new Necron Codex, and today we're going to have a look at the last code, the Nephrekh Dynasty. So let's have a look and see what GW say about it. Okay, so the Nephrekh. The Necrons are the undisputed masters of science. Whilst the warp continues to elude their grasps, the levels of their technologies borders on magical. The Nephrekh Dynasty take this to a new level, augmenting their bodies with metagold and phasing through solid matter with their translocation beams. And of course that is their dynastic code, which basically allows them to advance their full 6 inches when they advance. If you have My Will Be Done, they can also advance 7 inches, and at the same time they ignore other models and terrain when advancing. And this is what they say about that. There are all sorts of units that excel in the Nephrekh army, and whilst we'd recommend Immortals with Tester Carbines in particular, broadly speaking, any model carrying an assault weapon is a strong candidate. Indeed, for a change, we'll be using this preview to check out a couple of units that have a place in any Necron army, not just the Nephrekh Dynasty. These guys are just too awesome not to mention. Now that is interesting. What they're basically saying is that this dynasty doesn't necessarily benefit certain units. It's more of an army-wide thing, basically making the Necron army very fast. Of course, assault weapons are going to benefit the most because you can advance and still shoot them, even though of course -1 ballistic skill. So that's pretty much it for the Nephrekh Dynasty, which is fair enough, especially if they're going to tell us more about the C'tans. Okay, so the C'tans, or the C'tan Shards, which to be fair, since they've been shards, have been quite difficult to field on the table. 8th edition has helped. Not being able to target them unless they're the closest unit has definitely been useful. However, let's find out if they've improved. Okay, so the C'tan Shards. Whilst C'tan Shards can never benefit from dynastic codes, we couldn't resist spotlighting them in this preview. These enslaved Star Guards add some significant, if highly unpredictable, punch to Necron armies. Thanks to extended suite of powers of the C'tan, one of our favourites is the Cosmic Fire, a brutal ability that punishes armies that use multiple small units. Apologies if you can hear a funny noise, someone has decided to mow their grass right when I'm making this video. Okay, so Cosmic Fire. Roll a d6 for each enemy unit within 9 inches of the C'tan Shard. Add 1 to the roll if the C'tan Shard is using this power in a Tesseract Vault. On a 4+, the unit being rolled suffers d3 mortal wounds. Okay, so it's only on a 4+ and it's only 9 inches. A 3+ if you're in the vault. But at that close range you are probably going to have quite a number of units around you. And d3 mortal wounds on each of those units on a 4+ or on a 3+ in the vault sounds pretty good.
Necrons!
Okay, so now they preview another power of the C'tan. It's called Sky of the Falling Stars. It says, pick up to 3 different enemy units that are within 18 inches of the C'tan Shard. Roll a d6 for each. Subtract 1 from the result if the C'tan Shard using this power is in the Tesseract Vault. If the result is less than the number of models in the unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. An unmodified roll of a 6 will always foul. Okay, so this power is for targeting larger units. Interesting that it fouls on a 6, quite unusual for Warhammer 40k. However, there's a good chance of inflicting d3 mortal wounds on larger units, and this is 18 inches, and you can choose up to 3 units. That means you can keep your distance with your C'tan and use this power. So again, it sounds like a good power. Now the great thing about the powers of the C'tan is that they aren't psychic powers and they're inflicting mortal wounds. They're quite similar, I suppose, to Smite, but your enemy doesn't have a chance to deny the powers, which is very, very useful. Okay, so then it starts to explain a bit more about how these things work. So it says, you'll be able to cast these powers with your classic C'tans, the Nightbringer and the Deceiver. Or you could harness the powers of the Transcendent C'tan to represent the fractured, unstable personalities of a Transcendent C'tan. You can now pick one of the following traits, or roll for 2 before your game starts. So the powers we've just seen are for the Deceiver and the Nightbringer. The Transcendent C'tan has a different set of powers, and this is quite interesting. There's a table of 6 powers, however, power number 1 is this. Cosmic Tyrant. This model can use 2 different powers of the C'tan at the end of each of your movement phases instead of only 1. So whilst there's 6 powers listed down, one of the powers isn't actually a power, it just indicates that it can use 2 powers as opposed to 1, and that makes the previous thing we just read quite interesting. So it says you can now pick one of the following traits, or you can roll for 2. So in other words, you can have 2 random powers, or you can pick one. Now of course, if you're going to pick one, you'd pick number 1, which lets you pick 2. So effectively you can have 2 powers, so if you roll for them you take your chances on which powers you get, but if you rolled a 1 it means you get 3 powers. Now assume you can't have 2 powers the same, so if you rolled a double 1 of course you'll have to re-roll one of the 1s. So what are the other powers? Okay, so we have immune to natural law, add 1 to saving throws made for this model.
Necrons!
You mean we can have a 3+ saving throw on our C'tan? At last, GW. I actually love that. So that is definitely a potential go-to for me. Sentient Necrodemus. This model regains D3 lost wounds at the start of each of your turns. That is very good. Transdimensional Displacement. When this model advances, add 12 inches to its movement characteristic for that movement phase instead of rolling a dice. That's good, that makes your C'tan very fast. Entropic Touch. You can re-roll found wound rolls for this model in the fight phase. Okay, and Writhing Worldscape. Enemy units do not receive a bonus to their saving throws for being in cover whilst they're within 12 inches of this model. Situational, but potentially quite useful. Each C'tan in your army will feel chaotic, terrifying and powerful and unique, exactly as they should be. Okay, I'll go along with that. The powers are definitely quite exciting now, even if they are still a little bit random. But I think the C'tans are definitely going to make it back on the table a lot more than they were. It's a shame we don't have a nice big new C'tan model. However, the C'tan rules themselves do look a lot better. Okay, so that's the C'tans, but how about the Doom Scythe? I'm really hoping that this also gets some new rules. Okay, so the Doom Scythe, which I have to say I did dub as the worst unit in the index. So let's find out if it's improved. Okay, so the flyer slot is a competitive one when building a Warhammer 40,000 army list, and particular in the Necron army. Really, we've only got 2 flyers, is it that competitive? Where usually you'll be picking between offensively orientated Doom Scythes and the invaluable transportive power of the Night Scythe. To be fair, I've not really been using flyers at all in 8th edition because both units haven't really been that good with their rules. However, whilst Doom Scythes might not directly benefit from translocation beams, they're still a valuable pick in the Nephrekh army. Why? Because transport duty can be taken by translocation crypt stratagem. Okay, so stratagem time, 1 command point. Use this stratagem during deployment. You can set up a Nephrekh infantry or swarm unit from your army in translocation crypt instead of placing it on the battlefield. At the end of your movement phase, this unit can translocate into the battle. Use this stratagem during deployment. You can set up a Nephrekh infantry or swarm unit from your army in a translocation crypt instead of placing it on the battlefield. At the end of your movement phases, this unit can translocate into the battle. Set it up anywhere on the battlefield that's more than 9 inches away from any enemy models. Okay, so whilst this doesn't have anything to do with Doom Scythes themselves, it is a very interesting stratagem for this particular dynasty. So basically you can hold things back in reserve that are infantry and swarms and then teleport them deep strike onto the battlefield. And this is the first time the swarm special rule has been highlighted, so the scarabs can actually deep strike in now. That's pretty nice. Obviously deep striking in some infantry is also pretty nice. We have the Veil of Darkness, so running alongside that could be pretty good. Of course it does mean holding more units in reserve, and you don't want too many units in reserve. However, let's have a look and see what else they say. Now this stratagem is just one command point, and it says, use this stratagem in your shooting phase if a Dynasty Doom Scythe from your army is within 6 inches of 2 other friendly Dynasty Doom Scythes. The Doom Scythes cannot fire their death rays this phase. Instead, select a point on the battlefield within 24 inches of all 3 vehicles that is visible to all of them. Roll a d6 for each unit within 3 inches of that point. Add 1 to the result if the unit being rolled for has 5 or more models, but subtract 1 if the unit being rolled for is a character. On a 4+, that unit suffers 3 d3 mortal wounds. Okay, so this stratagem is for when using 3 Doom Scythes. That's quite a lot of Doom Scythes, and you have to sacrifice their shooting to do it. I suppose the idea of the previous stratagem, teleporting in your units to try and box in your enemy, is to push your enemy close together. It sounds like a bit of an oddball tactic, which I have to say I don't think I'm that impressed with. Now if you have Doom Scythes, maybe you like the model, maybe you think you could make use of this stratagem. Let me know in the comment box below what you think of this stratagem. Right, let's have a look at the final paragraph. Okay, so they finish off by saying, usually moving Doom Scythes have to worry about accuracy when firing their death rays. We know that, yes. But with this stratagem, tougher enemies will be reliably destroyed, while your opponent will be forced to space their army units as widely as possible to avoid obliteration. Well, yes, but you have to take 3 Doom Scythes. That's a lot of Doom Scythes. Okay, so that is it for all the Necron previews. Now the new codex comes out tomorrow. I'll be picking up my copy, be reading my copy, and then I'll be making more videos. So make sure you stay tuned for those. Beam me up.